Hi there, and welcome to episode number 123, where Amy Wheeler and I discuss fear. Fear can have a huge impact on our health and well-being, affecting our body and mind, affecting our nervous system, our digestion, our immune system, and affecting our mental health also. Please stay tuned to get lots of tips and guidelines from Ayurveda and Yoga. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello, and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. I have the lovely Amy Wheeler with me here today. Hello, Amy.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today. Happy to be here.
Always a pleasure. So today our topic is fear. And I think this is a very timely topic right now, given that there's a lot of fear in the headlines. Fear is an emotional response due to a real or even a perceived threat. It can range from feeling uncomfortable, for example, as if you're getting some exam results, or to feeling paralyzed if you're in an accident. Now, our brain is hardwired for fear, and it's part of our normal brain function. It kept our ancestors alive back in the day when they had to hunt for their food, and we are hardwired for self-preservation. Our body is hardwired for that. Now, just some things about fear, the different types of fear. It can be instinct, like a reaction to pain. It could be learned fear due to past experiences. It could be taught in our home, from our culture, from the news. And it could be imagined fear. I feel like imagined fear in the modern world would be something like fear of losing our self-worth or not being accepted, and, looking at the likes on social media and so on. Now, fear causes all sorts of reactions in our body and mind, and this is what we're going to discuss today, right, Amy?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
This is the key, right?
Yes, and I know this is your area, Amy, so I'd love to discuss now up front about the different reactions to fear and what happens in our body and mind. So I'll let you take it over, because I know this is what you love to talk about, right?
It is. I love to bridge these ancient teachings with modern neuroscience. And so
Wonderful.
I just want to start with, going all the way back to the time where your soul or your Purusha has, found what I call an earth suit that it wants to inhabit for some time, some years. And when the Purusha and the Prakriti, the soul and the body-mind, come together, there's something called ahankara. And this is a very deep, deep part of us that basically says, I must survive. And amoebas have it. Plants have it as they reach for the light. Animals have it as they, have instinctual fear and run away or whatever. And humans obviously have it. And so this ahankara is there to help us survive. But unfortunately, I think what happens is the ahankara gets so big that it starts kind of taking over and driving the earth suit in directions that the earth suit, when I say that, I mean body mind, probably shouldn't be going and are actually harmful to us.
Right, which is kind of what we're seeing today, which is why we want to discuss this topic.
Yeah. So when the ahankara gets larger and larger, and this unconscious or conscious fear for survival starts driving the inner parts of us, it changes our perception. We can see the exact same thing as someone else and have a completely different perception of it. It changes our thought patterns. It changes the words that come out of our mouth, our communication styles. It changes our behaviors and our actions. So, I mean, if you just think about that right. Fear is driving your perception, it's driving your thoughts, it's driving your words, it's driving your behaviors. Whew, that's a big deal.
It's crazy, isn't it? It just really changes your whole perception of the world.
Absolutely. And so, you can play this out in the yoga and Ayurvedic systems, that when your perception and your thoughts and your words are all changing, you're actually changing the elemental qualities of your human system, the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the space. And I know in a few minutes we're going to get into that, so I'll kind of leave that for a moment. But this is to say that you are different in the world, and you perceive the world to be different when you're in a lot of fear. And so this is not to say that coronavirus doesn't exist and that it isn't a threat and that we can ignore it and just do nothing. I mean, I for one, am washing my hands like crazy. I have masks ordered just in case I need them. I stocked up on pet food yesterday that could last me several weeks if I needed it. I've got handy wipes all over the place in my car, in my office. It's not that I'm ignoring it, but I'm not allowing. I've done what I can do. I'm getting a good night's rest. I exercise every day to keep my immune system strong. I'm drinking tons of water. I'm eating healthfully. And I've done all that, and now I will not allow that ahankara to push my fear so much that my perceptions and my communications and my thoughts and my behaviors are completely dismantled by the fear. Right. At some point, you do what you can do, and then you say, okay, I'm actually not going to focus on that. I have got things to do, and I'm going to connect to my dharma and my work, which is also going to strengthen my energetic field. And I know that whatever comes up, I can handle it. Even if I contracted coronavirus, I can handle that. I would be quarantined. I'd probably finish my book in quarantine. I've already got a plan. I'm like, maybe I should get it. I just think that when we get immobilized or paralyzed by this fear, whatever it is, it doesn't just have to be coronavirus. Think of any fear that you have. Right. And you really, and I'm going to use a controversial word here, you indulge yourself and allow yourself to go down that road. Just know that you are showing up very differently in the world, and it is affecting, as I said, your perception and your thoughts and your communication and your behavior. It's going to affect your immune system. It definitely is affecting your nervous system. It's affecting your endocrine system. You're actually, sadly, having a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're opening yourself up to the potential that your body will not be able to fight off this virus. And that's just to say that there's many people who have been exposed to it but haven't gotten it too, right? So we want to keep our nervous system, keep our endocrine system, keep our immune system strong with all the positive dinacharya routines that we have from yoga and Ayurveda, and then just not indulging in this I must survive ahankara, growing it. Don't put water and sunshine on that if you can stop yourself.
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Because we're in this state of fear, it really does impact our, like you said, our nervous system, our immunity, our mental health, and how we're perceiving the world. And I'd love for you to talk a bit, Amy, about how it affects our nervous system, because I think that's really interesting. And I know there's a lot of new theories on this as well.
Yes, this is so interesting that, I like to tell people your nervous system can be in a very nice rest and digest or relaxation response. And I'm just going to call that, 0. And I have a scale from 0 to 10. And, maybe at 1 or 2 or 3, you've got some really nice alertness. You're awake, you're attentive, you're clear in your mind, you're ready for comprehension or a speaking or, whatever activities you have to do that day. And, you're in your sympathetic nervous system, but it's actually the really good part of your sympathetic nervous system. I don't like to label, the parasympathetic is the good one and the sympathetic is the bad one. That's just not true. And in fact, we're in both all the time. It's just what percentages, right? So, ideally we want to be living at a 1, 2, 3 sympathetic and then dipping down into the rest and digest relaxation response, and just kind of this oscillating, throughout the day and the night as you're sleeping, just kind of moving through sympathetic, parasympathetic. It's a natural cycle, right? And we actually need to cycle through. However, what many of us are doing is we're living at a 4, 5, 6, which I call the fight response. And, in Ayurveda, we might call that pitta. And we're a little bit aggravated. Our sympathetic nervous system is dialed up a little bit more. It's not a healthy place to live. It's okay for the occasional fight you need to have, but you're not supposed to live there. And many of us are spending about 12 hours a day there.
Right.
And then if you dial it up even further in the sympathetic nervous system, you get to, more of a vata response where you're living at, say, 7, 8, 9. And this is where the fear comes in, this really strong fear and worry and restlessness and, basically being very ungrounded in your thinking and your perceiving and your way of being in the world.
Right. And could this be considered the area where you might do flight as well?
Exactly. So you've got the fight and then the flight as you're moving up the scale. And then if things go really wrong, meaning you're in a very traumatic crisis type situation, your vata is going to go into the stratosphere and your nervous system is actually going to immobilize you because it's trying to protect you and save you. It's a natural response that happens that basically it dumps us into the part of our parasympathetic nervous system that shuts everything down. It slows down the heart rate. It basically is having you play dead.
Right.
And so that's interesting too, because here you are at the top of the scale. You're 10 plus, but you're in parasympathetic nervous system, right? And you're probably disembodied, meaning you don't have connection with your body. So when I think of fear, it could be that you're going to fight and your sympathetic nervous system is going to say, I got this and I'm mad and I'm angry and I'm going to kick this thing. It could be that you go into flight, the 8, 9, 10, and you kind of start to disembody and get very ungrounded and have a lot of fear and worry. And it could be all the way up into the parasympathetic nervous system where you're in more of an immobilization response. So I guess what I want to say with all of this is that the more we allow the ahankara to take over, we're going to be in the fight, flight, freeze / immobilization area, right. None of which is healthy for our nervous system, our immune system, or our endocrine system. And a lot of what we're trying to do with people in yoga therapy and Ayurveda is to help them develop a lifestyle and a dinacharya routine and a mental focus that they're actually living in the rest and digest part of their parasympathetic nervous system and the 1, 2, 3, just barely kind of turned on in their sympathetic nervous system and just kind of oscillate down there throughout their days and nights instead of being so stuck up in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus.
Yes, absolutely. This is what we're trying to do, is create that buffer so that you can live in the modern world, which has a lot of natural stressors, but that you're not getting triggered by it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't real threats out there, right? I have this discussion with my friends and my students and my husband all the time. The world is a rough place. It's amazing that humanity has survived, if I'm honest, with all the potential threats to us. And it doesn't help to focus on that. I mean, we could say the same thing with politics. Right. Of course we care. Of course we want to do our part. Of course we want the world to be a wonderful place. And indulging in politics 6, 7, 8 hours a day and sending our nervous systems into fight, flight, or freeze on a regular basis is actually making the problem worse.
Exactly.
Now we don't have the resources to do what we need to do and live our dharma in the world.
Right. And this is where self-care comes in. These self-care practices of limiting the amount of time that you're watching the news or watching this information. Obviously we want to stay informed, but not to the excessive amount that it's going to push you up this scale into, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. We definitely want to make sure that we're responsible for keeping ourselves in this nice zone, like Amy suggests on the scale, 0 being rest and digest to 1, 2, 3. So we're going in and out of that lower scale of the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. And I think now it may be interesting to talk about, what happens with the doshas and how they react to fear, and look into that a little bit. And fear really comes from if there's too much of the air element to the body. So vata, being comprised of the air and space elements, is really prone and really sensitive to fear and anxiety. And when vata is aggravated, it can lead to many of these outcomes that drive us in higher up that scale into the sympathetic nervous system, right?
Absolutely. And, it's so interesting because the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutras talks about this, that basically the way to get enlightened is to reduce your fear. And then Ayurveda picks that up and says, vata, high vata, is the driver of about 80% of our mental and physical illnesses.
Right.
So it's a big deal. You've got these two systems of thought, yoga and Ayurveda, that both are agreeing fear is not going to be a beneficial thing for us.
Yeah, and it really does affect everything. Like when vata is aggravated, we know the digestive fire or the agni becomes irregular. Now, when our digestive fire is working normally, it brings fearlessness. But on the other hand, if our agni or digestive fire is abnormal, it's not working efficiently, it creates fear and anxiety. And this can create that person to tend to run away from problems. We know vata is all about movement, and there can be a tendency to flee from issues when they come up in life. And we see that quite often with the Ayurveda vata dosha. Have you seen that? I'm sure you have, Amy.
Oh, I call it the eject.
Right? Yes, we talked about this before. Yeah.
You think you're in relationship with someone. You think, okay, we're having a rocky time. We'll work through this. Let's communicate. And boom, they're out, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
That's high vata.
High vata, yeah. And so that comes with, if you have an irregular digestion, you need to look at these things. Again, we need to take responsibility for our own health and do that self-care and that check-in with ourselves. And, vata can also affect, when it's aggravated, affect the nervous system, which can cause like a perceived fear of the future, because we know vata has a tendency to look into the future. To the mind can be the future a lot. So it could be fear of the future, fear of the unknown. It can bring nervousness and anxiety as well, where the nervous system is really wired due to an aggravated vata.
And let's go back and remind ourselves that when you're having all this fear, you're actually perceiving everything differently and behaving differently and communicate. It's not going to work out. I'm sorry to say, but I almost feel that when we allow ourselves to have this fear, it could actually invite illness because your system is now out of balance.
Absolutely. It certainly affects because your system is under threat. So those vital resources are like your immune system are not working 100% because the body is just feels like it's under threat.
Exactly. And, I know that fear for me and for you and for all of our listeners it's not rational, it's not logical, it's not something we even have control over, that this ahankara is so deep in us telling us you must survive.
Right.
So we can do all these dinacharya rituals and routines. We can do self-talk. We can, strengthen our immune system, strengthen our nervous system, strengthen our digestive system. We can do all of this, and it still might be there.
Yeah. But at the same time, we really need to be mindful and really pay attention, especially these days, given the amount of things that are going on in the world, to make sure that we're trying to do our best to keep ourselves in balance and to keep ourselves in a more sattvic way of life.
And that's why I like this idea of the scale of your nervous system, 0 to 10, because you might be living at a 7, 8, 9 right now in fear of many, many things. But through your yoga and Ayurvedic routines, you could start living at a 4 or 5. And, it's still not perfect, but it is so much better than a 7, 8, 9.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
So much less suffering.
Absolutely. Yeah, because, when the body's aggravated too, it can go into the mind channel. That's where we have constriction, like you're talking about. We're not perceiving things right. And that can lead to the feeling of isolation. We're feeling that we're isolated, but in fact we're not. Again, we're not seeing things clearly. And this can lead to panic attacks and depression and so on. So I'd love to talk now about how we can restore balance. Being in this mode, right, being in this fear mode is very draining on the body and mind and can lead to a lot of mental imbalances. So let's maybe talk about now, Amy, how we can restore the balance, relieve the body and mind of this constriction, of this feeling of, misperception, feeling of isolation, this fearful on guard mode, and talk about how we can bring in things to help. Before Amy and I answer this question, I want to jump in here and let you know that one of the best ways to bring your body and mind in balance and really to calm the Vata dosha like we're talking about today is to do a cleanse, really reset the body and mind. Ayurveda recommends cleansing at intervals throughout the year, in particular in between the joint of the seasons. We're coming up now in the joint of the seasons, depending on where you are in the world. But in the Northern Hemisphere, we're going from winter to spring, and then in the Southern Hemisphere, we're going from summer to autumn. So really important to clear out any of the toxin buildup at this time of the year. At the end of a season, there tends to be more of an accumulation of the dosha of that season, and there also can tend to be a toxic buildup. So in a seasonal cleanse, you're going to eliminate the physical toxins and emotional toxins. You're going to bring the doshas of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha back into balance. You're going to help maintain balance in the mental gunas of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Your digestive system will be reset and will work more efficiently. You'll have better elimination. You'll have more mental clarity and improved awareness, a calm nervous system. And you'll be bringing in not only foods to cleanse, but also these dinacharya, these daily self-care practices to help keep your body and mind in balance. Now, I have a seasonal cleanse starting on the spring equinox of March 20th. So it's coming up very soon. This cleanse, you'll get a 90-minute online consultation with me where I determine your birth constitution, determine if you have a current imbalance, and then tailor the foods and the yoga and the meditation and the pranayama and anything else I think you need to bring your body and mind in balance. So like I said previously in this episode, it's really important for us to take responsibility for our own health, and part of this is to do regular cleansing, to give our body a break, to do a reset, clear out the toxins, restore balance to Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, restore balance to our mental gunas of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And doing this at periods throughout the year, certainly at the change of seasons, will really help for us to maintain balance, restore our health, and help us to prevent prevent this fear and anxiety that can happen when we have aggravation in the doshas, and particularly in aggravation in vata. So if you're interested in reading up more about my seasonal cleanse, please click on the link in the show notes or go to my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. Go to the events tab where I have the group discounted seasonal cleanse starting March 20th. If you're listening to this after that date, you can do a cleanse at any time throughout the year privately. Just go to my website and visit the services tab and choose programs in the drop-down box. So that's one amazing way from Ayurveda to help maintain balance and prevent any of these aggravations in the body. Okay, so let's get back to the show.
Well, first of all, I would say that it is not a good strategy to tell our clients or our spouses or our friends, hey, this is just in your head. Right. You're perceiving, basically victim shaming that you've got the problem, right? Of course. Right. But we need to say that because it when you see someone who has so much vata and so much fear, it is very hard to engage with them. And on one hand, you don't want to join them and buy in and reinforce, but on the other hand, you don't want to tell them their experience isn't valid. So there's this area in there that, this is the relationship part of it, where you hold space and allow for them to express it, but we really don't want to go in and reinforce it.
Absolutely. I agree. Allow them to talk about it, but there's no even need to have a back and forth conversation about it.
Yeah. And then, what I've been working to do, because there was a time in my development where I wanted to tell them like, hey, your perception is changing and your this is changing. And that's just not helpful to them at that moment. So this is where, this is what you do for a living, is you are working with people to develop structure and routine, and you wake up and you have hot water, and then you empty your bowels, and then and this structure and this routine naturally brings down vata.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's talk a little bit about that. And this is where we look to, rather than, of course, you don't highlight a person's, misperception, but you look at, okay, how can I bring in some self-care practices and look at their lifestyle? And in Ayurveda, it's the principle of opposites. So bringing in the opposite qualities of Vata's light, cold, and mobile. So we want more heaviness, we want more grounding, we want more warmth, we want more static time. So maybe we'll go through a little bit of that. So like heavy grounding foods, great. So talking to people about their food, or even for yourself, bringing in some root vegetables, grains, sweet potato, oils in your food, oils on your skin. Of course, grounding yourself through meditation and yoga, weighted blankets on your bed. There's lots of ways you can bring in that heavy quality. Any other thoughts there on heaviness, Amy?
One of the best therapeutic treatments that I see when people have really high vata is a little bit of lightweight training.
Yeah, very good.
It really brings it down almost immediately.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's important that it's not intense. Like Amy said, lightweight training. The heaviness of the weight are really good for vata, and also really good for the bone density. Right.
And it has an immediate psychological effect of decreasing the vata too.
Right. So
I take a lot of baths, a lot of baths with oil and Epsom salts. Those are always really good for decreasing vata.
Exactly. And that's bringing in the warm. So making sure that, instead of the cold, now we want to bring in the opposite quality of warmth, warm food, warm baths, like Amy just said, being in a warm environment, warm oils in your body, and keeping your body warm, being really mindful when you go out, especially if you're in a windy, cold environment. You got scarves and hats and gloves, and wear warm colors. That in Ayurveda, they talk about colors as well, can have an effect on our doshas. So all that will help bring in that warmth as well for vata. Any other thoughts there, Amy?
Just, regarding the food, so many of us here in California love, sushi and smoothies, and and salads. Those are not going to help at all. We need warm, unctuous soups, cooked vegetables, just really warm, moist foods. Right,
exactly. And good proteins as well is very important for vata. Really good proteins, and making sure when you look at your meal that it looks grounding, it looks heavy, and that it looks not like comfort food, right? I'm talking about things like oatmeal or sweet potatoes, or, stews and sauces. It should look moist, definitely avoiding dryness. And then to combat that mobile, natural quality of Vata, bringing in more static quality. So that would be in routines, the same waking and sleeping times, the self-care practices we talk about all the time, the dinacharya, avoiding excess travel, particularly avoiding stress around that Vata time of day between 2 and 6 p.m. Really important to try and limit the amount of stress. Of course, meditation, pranayama is great as well. I think that's very important. So how can you bring some calming, static activities into your day?
Yeah, I think, for me, a big change has been to eat at scheduled meal times so that my body knows what to expect. When is food coming next? Yeah. I'm not snacking, which is good. But that routine of I eat at 7 a.m., 11:30 a.m., and 4:30 p.m., your body, it gets the structure, and I go to bed at 8:30. I start preparing. I'm in bed by 9, and I'm doing my mudras to take me into sleep so that my mind is in a good, solid, nice, happy place when I go to sleep. And then getting good sleep. I mean, one of the biggest things we can do to combat high Vata is to really get good sleep. And the problem is Vata throws your sleep out of whack, right? So, having strategies in the middle of the night for when you're not able to sleep. I know different people do different things, but I get up and I'll have a little, something warm and heavy, if I'm really having trouble sleeping, like a cup of miso soup. I keep miso powder or paste in my refrigerator, and I'll just heat up some hot water. I have been known in the middle of the night to get up and have a warm shower or a warm bath with oil and then get back in bed. And, it takes 30 minutes, but then I have, 4 more hours of blissful sleep. So what are your strategies for changing your gunas in the middle of the night and not just sitting there thinking, oh, I should be going to sleep. I should go to sleep. Oh, I need sleep. Right. No, get up and do something to change your gunas right there. Hot water, warm water, work for me.
Yeah, and pranayama, some slow breathing, or yoga nidra. You have a yoga nidra session downloaded so you can listen to that, and that can soothe you back to sleep as well.
Right. Yeah. Just have all that stuff ready to go. Another little trick I have is I have these hot water hydro flasks, that keep the water warm for 12, 14 hours. And I'll just fill one of those up, by my bed. Yeah. And then if I'm up in the middle of the night, I'll just start sipping on some hot water, which tends to bring the Vata down.
That's great. That's wonderful too. And then other tips from Ayurveda on that, if you're, really tossing and turning, is just put some oil on the soles of your feet and putting oil on the crown, a little bit on the crown of your head, and even on, a few drops on a cotton ball and in your ears. So you're creating that cocoon-like effect. It's very grounding, and that can be something you could do really quick in the bathroom and then hop back into bed and maybe do some slow breath work and so on to soothe you back to sleep. The main thing is not to get caught up in the mind, right? We start getting caught up in the mind, so bringing your attention onto something else, like the breath, can really help, so you're not getting lost in virtual thoughts and winding yourself up.
I break it down to the qualities, which, the qualities of Vata are rough and dry and hard and cold. So when we're cultivating the opposite, what can I do in my bed to cultivate the opposites of rough, dry, cold, and hard? And so I have big body pillows. I have my blankets are so cuddly and so snuggly and so warm, right? So just start thinking of how do I bring more softness, more warmth, more cuddliness into my evening routine.
Right.
Yeah.
And Vata a lot of times likes that cocoon feeling, wrapping themselves up tight in the blankets.
The other thing we might talk about is that you should exercise and burn off some of your cortisol, but do it in the morning. Yeah. So because cortisol is usually highest in the morning, so burn off that stress in the morning and then I actually like to do a little bit of exercise after my work day to kind of burn off, sitting all day and the stress of the work day and kind of release it again. I go for a walk with my dog. So it sounds interesting that you would do exercise to decrease the vata, but I think of it as a discharge to kind of get it out. You just have to be careful not to do that right before bed, because then, of course, it would keep you awake.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially if you've been seated a lot during the day, and just to get out in nature and do some light exercise like walking in the evening, but making sure that you're not exercising past 7 p.m., like Amy said, so that your nervous system is not activated for sleep.
Exactly.
And then, another thing I want to mention here, Amy, is the importance of having faith in something, particularly for vata, because when it's aggravated, like I mentioned earlier, there can be this feeling of being isolated and lonely, and this perceived sense of extra space and air around you. There's those elements of increase in your body and mind. And so having faith in something, I think, is really important, because it's going to help establish a solid foundation. So thinking about what is it that you turn to when life becomes fearful, and if you don't have something, what can you bring in? Maybe it could be religious faith, it could be your meditation practice, it could be your yoga practice. There's many things you could turn to, but what is it personally that works for you? Some people, it could be their creativity, especially for vata, being very creative. Having that creative energy, doing something creative can really bring you into a place of calm. It's almost meditative like.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah, so I think that's a good, interesting question to ask yourself. If you're feeling this fear, is where do I turn to, or what do I turn to, and is there something I can bring in that gives me that foundation of calm?
Yeah, in the Yoga Sutras, if enlightenment means we have released the ahankara and the fear, and the antidote to that is shraddha, faith or trust, and
right,
so, what do you trust in? What do you have faith in? Is it your family? Is it your church community? Is it your God? Is it nature? Is it, you can trust yourself because you're going to be honest with yourself and not, people please and be true to yourself. Right. We all have something that we trust in. Is it your dog? Mm-hmm. Your dog's love, unconditional love, right? Right. There's many, many ways to find that trust or that shraddha. And I think that is, what the Yoga Sutra says is the true antidote to fear.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting question for us all to ask ourselves, is what do I find solace in at these times when it's so fearful?
Right. And that's one thing that's so interesting about coronavirus, is that we almost, if we would contract it, we have to go into quarantine and isolation, when community is what brings fear down. Yeah. This, you get in contact with other people and you have mirror neurons that, if the herd is stable and steady and calm, everybody in the herd, their nervous system comes into balance. Mm-hmm. But when you have coronavirus, or you think you might have it, you're going to get quarantined and be dragged off all by yourself without your herd.
Yeah. This is the biggest issue I'm seeing with it. I'm here in France. We greet each other by giving each other bees, a kiss on each cheek. Now that's not allowed anymore. I met the usual people I meet on the beach every morning, and one elderly gentleman said it's like being at war. He felt so like weird not giving the kisses. But that's my concern with it, is that we already feel this sense of isolation in our world with technology and so on, and that it's going to increase that fear due to that isolation now, and that there's no sporting events and concerts and large gatherings are being cancelled. And that really is the biggest shame of all for me, because we need this community more than ever. And now with coronavirus, that community, those places where we can meet are being cancelled, and they're not being recommended right now.
We have the same thing. Our governor of California just declared a state of emergency, and already at my university, they're talking about okay, we have 2 weeks left in this term, and do we have to shut down the university and do everything online for the last 2 weeks, right? So, and, regarding the greetings, I think finding other ways to greet each other, and I have a few I want to share with you because I think they're really cute and it makes my heart warm and feel connected to the people that I'm with. We can do a namaste, little bow with our hands in Anjali Mudra. We could do Spock hands. That always makes people smile.
I saw that on them online this morning. Yeah.
Or you can do what I'm going to call the foot shake, where you stand on your left foot and extend your right foot, and so does the other person. And you kind of go arch to arch, and then you switch legs, stand on the right foot, extend the left legs, and go arch to arch, like you're shaking your feet.
A little balance incorporated there, but it's a big deal, people, because you automatically go in to give the 2 kisses, and now everyone's like, oh, we can't do that anymore. So it's that I think has a big effect. Not only the greetings, but everything has a big effect on our connection. So that for me is the biggest problem. Coronavirus will pass. I'm not getting caught up in the panic of it all. Thankfully here there isn't a whole lot of panic. People are getting on with life and so on. But for me the biggest problem is that fear, the sense of isolation that people will feel because that they're not in that community. And
we're communal beings. I mean, it's deep beings, hardwired into our nervous systems.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy right now. But, this too shall pass. But in the meantime, there's learning lessons in it for us all. And now I'd like to turn Amy. We'll stop talking about coronavirus. We're hearing too much about it. and move on to how fear can be healthy for us. Because there is a positive aspect to fear. It's not all doom and gloom. And we've given our advice and tips from yoga and Ayurveda on how to bring Vata back into balance. But a little fear can be a good thing. And fear, in fact, is not a weakness. Like sometimes it's perceived as a weakness. And it's not a problem. It's our reaction, I think, to fear is what we need to look at, right? I think fear can highlight areas that we need to reflect on in our lives, and then we maybe process so that we can thrive. Like, for example, if you get a health scare, this can really lead you on a path to health and wellness. So what do you think about that, fear having a positive aspect as well?
Well, when we go back to the ahankara, this part of us that says, I must survive, it's actually a wonderful thing if kept in check. Right. Meaning, of course we need to look for the light like the plants do. Of course we need to hunt for food like the animals do. Of course we need to be in community to survive. This is a natural part of being human. Yeah. And that little bit of fear to say, where's my next meal? Or, maybe I better try to be a nicer person today because I might get fired right. or whatever it is. Right. That's a healthy response to being human. Yeah. It's just when we let it get out of hand that it becomes the problem. So we should say the ahankara is a bad thing. It's a good thing. We must survive.
Yeah, it was designed to keep us alive. And I think maybe now it'd be good to discuss how do we prevent fear from holding us back and from getting out of hand. We can't prevent or control the emotion of fear, but I think, like I said earlier, we can build up this buffer to fear by bringing in some of our body and mind to balance, like we talked about earlier, and creating sattva with our food, our lifestyle, our mindfulness practice, with what we're exposing ourselves to, given social media and news and so on, and the people we have in our lives. So I think when we're in sattva, we're balanced, we're in a more peaceful place, and we have more of an understanding that our life is not in constant danger, and we have a more calm about us. We feel more peaceful. Of course, the stress will come and the fear will come, but I think we can handle it a lot better. What do you think of that, Amy?
I do. I mean, I think of these studies that are being done on microbiome, and they're starting to figure out what makes your microbiome thrive, your gut bacteria, and it's meditation and yoga and fluids and sattvic food and good relationships, right? And so you can see a physical manifestation of being in that body-mind sattvic state actually strengthens your microbiome, which has a connection to so many other systems of the body. Yeah. And when we get into fear and stress and anger and all these other emotions, and we don't take good care of ourselves with proper hydration and sattvic food, and we don't exercise, the microbiome actually get nasty. They're, the not so nice ones start to grow and thrive. So we have this physical manifestation in our body showing us what is going to make us healthy and happy and what's going to make us thrive, right? And we just have to get disciplined enough to do that. I know for me, if I don't put myself on a schedule and I don't put it in my calendar and I don't put my workouts in, and I even schedule meal times in my calendar because I'm the type that would just work right through them, right? So I think it's really a lot of discipline to structure our lives in a way that we have time for joy and we have time for good food and we have time for family connection, and really making an effort and valuing those things not as a luxury, but as the most important part of our lives and the reason we work so hard and the reason that we, go out there and get it done is so that we can thrive and have these joy and beauty in our lives.
Absolutely, yes. And our goal is to be more sattvic, but also, when fear arises, which it will in life, just like stress arises and so on, that we are more curious about it, I think is a good way to be. And, looking at it as sometimes it could be the little ego, not wanting to accept change or being fearful of something and wanting to remain safe and stay in the status quo. And so we have this, perceived safety. But, I think that when we want to grow in our life, that it requires expansion and requires a little bit of fearfulness. And, when that little ego comes up and gives all those, oh, you can't do that, or what could happen if you do that, and so on, or what happened last time, that going back to past experience, that we respect the fear, we acknowledge the fearful voice of the little ego, thank it, and then move forward, really breaking through those barriers that are holding you back. And these are those little fears that come up from preventing you from moving forward. And that can come up through bringing in self-care practices. I'm sure you also have seen a lot of that, Amy, when we ask people to make these changes. There can be a lot of fear that comes up, and that prevents them from, that fear is coming up and preventing the change and preventing them from creating more sattva and from moving forward into the life that they want.
Yes, I think one of the most potent self-care tools for building self-awareness is meditation and watching our minds. Right. That when we sit down and try to quiet our minds and move towards a state of meditation, which most of us never get to, like watching the thoughts that are bouncing around in there and just having that awareness, like, whoa, I know, where's that coming from?
Sometimes
and what's that about?
Crazy movie, but it's true. Being curious about those thoughts and ask yourself, well, why is it arising now? Is this something from a past experience, or is it future projection of what might happen? Or being curious and questioning those thoughts and seeing where is it coming from.
Right. And how do we just sit with them in a neutral way, not buying into them, but not dismissing them, not judging them, just sitting there with them and saying, okay, I see you, I hear you, I feel you. I don't have to act on any of this. Right. But clearly you want to be seen and heard, or you wouldn't be bouncing around in my head right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you bring up about, not feeding into it and avoid labeling the fear, because this can cause suppression of the fears into the tissues, right? I think the minute we label it or give it a voice, of course you want to acknowledge it, but make sure that you're not labeling it or trying to distract yourself or running away from it. Sit with it. Be curious about it, but not allowing yourself to get caught up in a virtual story about that. Acknowledge it, see it for what it is, and then moving through it.
Yeah, for me, it's the story. When I am sitting in meditation and I find myself making up a great big story and ruminating and going on this journey in my mind about what's about to happen or what did happen, and having an argument with someone in my mind. I should have said this. Right. That's just I just have to like stop and laugh at myself and be like, okay, let's rein it back in, Wheeler.
Right, exactly. No, we all have that experience, definitely getting caught up in a virtual story, and your body's reacting to that virtual story. So if you're in your head going, and she said, and I said, your blood pressure's rising, your nervous system's reacting, your body doesn't know it's just in your head. So you really have to be careful of that.
And, that is going to weaken your immune system and weaken your nervous system. Right. And
your pit is all fired up. You're going up the scale. You're 4, 5, 6. Then you're going
6,
to 7,
8, 9, 10.
And then you're a volcano.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I mean, I think, really using the fear, I think you could leverage it when it's, obviously when it's relatively on the low scale of fear. I'm not talking on the big scale, of course. When you're in that, 4, 5, 6, that, kind of fight stage, using it to your advantage rather than letting the pitta explode, right? Or, if you go higher up the scale, rather than running away from it, sitting with the fear and go, how can I use this to my advantage? What is this here to teach me? Why is this fear showing up? Is it from a past experience? If it's something I was taught on the news or from my family or culture? Is it something I'm projecting on into the future and it doesn't even exist? I think that can really be a teaching moment for us.
And I like to say, let's make important decisions from 1, 2, 3 and parasympathetic, meaning, that lower part of the scale. Yeah. Let's use our dinacharya, use our yogic practices, our meditation, our Ayurveda to bring us down there on a consistent basis in, where we're just oscillating between rest and digest and a little bit of sympathetic. And after we've been there for a week, after you've been able to maintain yourself down there, now make the important decision from there, because from there you have more clear perception. Mm-hmm. You will be more subtle in your communication. You will have clear thoughts, and your actions will be that of, nonviolence, trying to do, the least harm and still take care of yourself.
Right, exactly. That's great. And I think, making fear your friend, again, the lower scale of fear, and if you feel like you have a lot of that fear that's holding you back, is getting it out on paper. I always think like not keeping fear in your head, and especially for Vata, I always encourage someone who's Vata aggravated is to get those thoughts out on paper, get it out of the body, out of the tissues, and writing those fears out and just reflecting on them. Where is this fear coming from? And, then measure the impact that this fear will have on your life, but not on your life today, but on the bigger picture if you don't take steps forward. I think sometimes when we face our fears, or when we take a step forward and with courage and step into the fear to do something, sometimes it just dissipates. And we had imagined something much worse, much more horrendous than what actually happens when we step into it.
And I love that idea of just getting it out on the paper. And I think one way that we will know we're at the top end of the scale, the 6, 7, 8, 9, is that it will be very dynamic. I'll feel one way this day, and then 2 hours later I'll feel that way, and going back and forth.
Yeah.
And so if you're writing and you're just having a lot of up and down and back and forth and irregular thoughts and feelings and emotions, and okay, that right there tells you your Vata is high, the fear is high. Still do it, still get it out, but then hopefully over time you'll start to settle back down into the parasympathetic and the 1, 2, 3, and things will become much more steady and stable and regular.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's a good place to leave it today, to leave you with that homework of getting those fears out on paper and facing them and looking at them, and especially if you feel like they're holding you back in life. And look at the bigger picture of your life and where you want to go, and see if these fears are holding me back from where I want to go, and seeing how you could step into them. And, in most cases, they're not as scary as we perceive.
And I think that's, what Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is telling us, exactly what we're talking about today, is to move towards it, reflect on it, come back to your true nature. Remember who you are, that you are Purusha, you are the soul, and that this Prakriti experience, this material body-mind experience is, it's alive and well, it's happening, but let's remember who we really are, and that will help us rest in our true nature and have less fear.
Exactly. Beautiful. So at the end of it all, folks, just take good care of yourself, self-care practices, so that you can be that nice sattvic energy for those around you if they are going into worry, panic mode, that you could be that, that beacon of hope and calmness for people. Because I know all of you listening are on a path to better yourselves and create more sattva in your life. So at this time, when there is a lot of craziness going on, but taking care of yourself will have obviously benefits for yourself, but for those around you as well.
Can I just say one last thing?
Please do.
And also remember that we're at the time of year in the North American continent, at least, where the vata is really, really high just because of the season. And so we should also not take everything too seriously. Like, okay, my vata's high. It's fine. Right? So seasonal impacts have a big influence on us.
Yes, this too shall pass, people. Okay, Amy, thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. I really appreciate it, as always.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Of course, I look forward to chatting with you again. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself, and everyone else out there, take good care of yourself as well. I hope you found that episode with Amy on fear helpful. And if you think that this episode would be informative to family or friends, please share the episode with them. And also make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that the new episodes automatically download for you wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget the link in the show notes to the upcoming seasonal cleanse starting March 20th. And until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and ciao for now.